live broadcast. Actually, today's not really going to be all that much of a history one. Well, it's current affairs compared to history, if you like. Right, so I'm going to talk about Ukraine again, and just to make the point of my knowledge here, I'm ex-army. I've spent considerable time in Ukraine. I was in Bucha shortly after it was liberated. I was also in eastern Ukraine, in the liberated areas. I was in Kherson a few days after liberation, having had special military permission to actually enter it. So I have a vague idea of what I am talking about. I'm now in Poland, so I do have a little bit of idea. Now, normally I do things related on this channel to relate largely to the Third Reich, but I mean, there's other stuff as well occasionally goes up also. That's my specialist area. I would like here to sort of discuss the thing about the Ukrainian Spring Offensive, as it's been called, and it's now August, and we're not really seeing much in the way of changes. And I think that this Spring Offensive has been built up to such an extent. I think I did a video on it about 3 months ago, saying that it shouldn't be built up or anything like that, and not to have too great expectations. There's some people, including major army commanders, who were sort of talking about the war would be over by the summer, Crimea would be liberated, and that, I mean, to me, it was incredible. I don't know if it's naivety or fact that they don't know the area or what, but it really didn't make any sense. I mean, I have said all along that in my opinion this war is going to last a very long time. The problem we're faced with now is something which has never happened in the history of warfare. Never have such deep and complex fortifications being built, and an enemy which has been given a great deal of time and has huge resources to actually build them. And the thing that we're left with now is how can we compare this to previous battles and what things might have happened then. Now, when I was in the army, which is going back 40 years now, but you'd look at wars which had happened recently to make comparisons and to see how future wars might be fought. In 1973, there was the Fourth Arab-Israeli War, sorry, I get comments. I read the comment. I shouldn't really read the comments. I won't deal with them until actually I get to them. Fourth Arab-Israeli War, and the plan was Egypt attacked. It crossed the Suez Canal, which was quite a brilliant operation, I would have to say. And then what it did, it got short distance over it, and it set up a defensive line. Israel, which has a military doctrine of blitzkrieg par excellence, I would have to say, it attacked immediately, and it was defeated, and it was defeated absolutely thoroughly. It was defeated by a barrage of handheld missiles, RPG-7s, and they because of that, they just couldn't advance. As it happened, there was a little bit later, there was something I suppose could only be called a commando raid between two Egyptian armies. General Sharon, later Prime Minister, he put up a bridge across, he got to the Suez Canal, he put up a bridge and got some people over it. Rather daft thing to do in the circumstances, because he couldn't actually keep them there, because they would clearly become an artillery target and they clearly couldn't be supplied. But he knew that, and he gave them permission to go out and destroy whatever they could. No doubt they had quite a good time doing it. But one thing they did do was knock out the SAM bases, SAM anti-aircraft missiles, and as a result, that created a hole in the Egyptian defenses, which the Israeli Air Force could then exploit And once they gained this aerial superiority, which had been denied them because of the amount of SAM missiles which the Kremlin had supplied to both to both Egypt and Syria, then they couldn't. As a result of that, they were able to use the tanks which they had, and this ended up being a major defeat for the Egyptian army. In fact, I have to say, it was one, in my opinion, I'd have to put this as one of the most brilliant campaigns ever. And also, I mean, the initial Egyptian crossing, but also the Israeli crossing. But there, what happened was a hugely once hugely impregnable, a very impregnable wall was actually destroyed by the fact of a group of commandos, which more or less knocked out the main defenses of the line. Now, I'm going to go back further now in history, because I thought that was the most relevant one I could think of. One of the things at the time in the 80s was this: is that, well, what if this sort of thing happened in the Third World War? So at the time that there was, what if the Soviet Union was likely to attack us, and how would we defend ourselves against it? And the belief at the time was this: is that there would never be this concentration of missiles in one location. Now, let's face it, the bazooka, as such, to use a generic term, had existed from what, about 1943 onwards. I mean, certainly by at the end of 1944, you see whole groups of civil defense Volkssturm units being equipped with nothing but bazookas, which then, even up to I think, well, maybe at 100 meters they could be have some effect. But I mean, okay, 30 or 50 meter range, and if you're in an urban environment, that's going to be extremely potent weapon. So they had existed, yet still the tank showed itself to be extremely maneuverable and effective as far as attacks were concerned. Now, at the beginning of World War II, there were major defensive lines in Germany. For example, the defensive lines of the Pomeranian Line, or the West Wall, which was started even in the late 1920s, but they were sort of just fortified positions from time to time. There's the Westwall, West Wall, which was probably deeper defenses, but even so, it wasn't. They were just a collection of. The best known, of course, is the Maginot Line, and let's remember how the Maginot Line was broken. It was broken by driving around it. Which leads me to the first battle I'd like to now from the Second World War I'd like to mention, which is El Alamein. Now, during the Desert Campaign from 1941-42, not so much 1943, but 41-42, with the way which the lines would be attacked would be to go round them. And so if you go round the highly deep mine defensive lines, both sides, and individual positions, then sort of which may stop an advance or hold it back, hinder it, and then deeper defenses at the back, and behind that we'd have something like tanks or something to hit into the any breakthrough that actually occurred. The way, again, they got round this was by going round, normally by outflanking, by going around the south. By the time of the Battle of El Alamein, this wasn't possible, because the El Alamein position at its south had something called the Qattara Depression, which was deemed to be impossible for tanks to actually go through. I think there's a film of somebody going through it in a lorry or something, but it couldn't be bypassed. So therefore, only a frontal attack would actually work. By the time a breakthrough was achieved at El Alamein, it took a couple of weeks, and that was with massive British superiority, control of the skies, And added to this, the Germans were hardly, the Africa Corps just weren't getting supplies. Their supplies were not coming through. There wasn't a place to actually ice cold and Alex. Yeah, I was thinking of that one. Yes, yes. Well, that was a lorry, wasn't it? And there was no way that Rommel could have actually held out. So that was but to make the point of defensive positions. The next battle I think is worthy of mentioning is the Battle of Kursk in 1943. In this case, and the Soviets had put lines of defenses with an absolutely superhuman effort going back many kilometers, and one line after the other. Manstein, after the war, he said that no, that his book was called Lost. Whoops, there's my Obruch. Sorry. The thing has turned around. Hang on. Oh, oops. There we go. It did this because although today it wasn't necessary. See, I left it plugged in with this, but I'll take that out. And you shouldn't have that in a gimbal at the same time because obviously it upsets the gyroscope, or whatever it's called. Manstein said that the order to stop attacking at Kursk was to throw away a victory. The thing is this, the Soviets had something like 8 defensive lines, and he'd only broken through 3 of them, and at major cost. To me, the Battle of Kursk, if you look at the line of the front, which was established at the end of March 1943, and so up until the Battle of Kursk, with a huge salient with sort of Kursk in the middle of it, and it was an obvious target for attack, but the fact that the amount of effort put into it to defending it is absolutely, to my way of thinking, it's absolutely incredible. And I do appreciate, of course, that the Soviets had been warned by the so-called Red Orchestra spy organization that to expect an attack in that area. But even so, it was a major success. Now the thing is the Wehrmacht had local at times it had local air superiority, but not all the time. And it was the first time for major battles that it didn't have air superiority. Maybe in Stalingrad also they didn't really have air superiority towards the end. But anyway, the next thing I would like to say is D-Day, because now Kursk, a outflanking movement, perhaps it could have been done at a place, but that would have involved not attacking there at all. But on D-Day, and lots of people have compared this to the current battle to D-Day, which I don't think is quite fair. But it needs to be pointed this out, that it took D-Day was the 6th of June, and the targets which were set for to be captured in some cases were not captured until towards the end of July. So it's something very similar to the current attacks in Ukraine. The battles that were fought, largely tank battles, in an area where hedgerows, small towns, and offering lots of advantages to the defense. The area had largely been flooded to also. So, but I think the problem here was one of supply. It was the fact that the Allies couldn't supply quick enough to force a breakthrough. Other people actually may disagree with that. By the time the August came around, there was a battle called the Battle of Falaise Gap, which was largely, I think, Hitler sort of make this ordering units to cut off Americans which had broken out in the West, and German generals didn't want to do it. They saw what might happen, and this ended up in a major defeat. But to compare that, at the end, D-Day, the Battle of Normandy, it was won by largely one thing, and that was air power. and of course massive superiority on the ground. But without the air power, then it just wouldn't have happened. I studied at well, studied not the right word. I did a course in the University of Caen, and Caen was absolutely destroyed. The student magazine was called The Phoenix because it was the phoenix that had risen from the ashes of the town, which was completely destroyed during World War II. So this leads me to the following two conclusions. If it's fair to base things on previous battles, actually somebody there earlier did mention the Hindenburg Line, so I will say something about the Hindenburg Line. Hindenburg Line was built from 1916 onwards, and in 1917 the German troops retreated to it. It was a line which were heavily fortified, also with areas which were called kill zones, which was pre-plotted using artillery in the rear. So if soldiers of the enemy were seen in these kill zones, then they would ask the artillery to actually hit them. Use the same sort of thing in D-Day as well. And the Hindenburg Line was actually broken through at the Battle of Cambrai, for example. And at Cambrai, the reason the British broke through was because of the use of tanks. But it wasn't exploited for a very good reason, and that was because they didn't have anything to exploit it with. So there was a counterattack, and after the end of the counterattack, the situation was almost the same. Indeed, the Germans captured some land that they hadn't captured before, but then again, the British held on to some land which they had captured. So it was more or less equal. But had it been carried out in a way that which you have what's called a probing attack, and if then you've tried to find the weak point in the line, and if resistance is too great in one place, then you give up, and then but in other places you may find the fact that you may be able to break through. Now the clever bit in a probing attack is then the speed at which you can actually exploit this breakthrough. For example, Cambrai, I suppose the logical thing would have to use cavalry or something like that to do it. It was the only thing that would move fast. But in situations like we have, for example, today, the question would be the resources which do have to come from us, from the West, and the attack has to accept the fact that vehicles will be lost because of mines. I believe that in the beginning of June, I'm told that the losses in armored personnel carriers, above all, were so great because of mines that they couldn't. They decided that this wasn't a very good way of doing it. The thing is, with attacking these positions using people, because that's the only way it can be done. You're going to use soldiers moving forward very, very slowly and trying to locate where the enemy resistance is and then taking them out. But if you've got to go over minefields to do it. It's dreadfully slow, and it's horrendously slow. So this is the problem. But there's also another thing. Is that people are sort of trying to work their way through a minefield, and suddenly a Soviet helicopter appears, and at a distance which they can't fire it back at, then that stands to reason it's not very sensible. This is the reason why Ukraine must get enough support to actually have control of its skies. Without that, it's going to cost a lot of blood. Now, okay, so the conclusion to this entire story, as far as I'm concerned, is the following. This is not a normal war, because in a normal war, what would be happening both sides would hit each other, including their own national territory. The Western backers of Ukraine have forbidden the use of Western weapons to be used against Russian territory. Using the other way around, it never bothered when the Soviet Union was handing out weapons to IRA or something. It didn't bother them about using weapons on Western territory. But it's like it's okay for one, but not for the other. So therefore, I think that this needs to be lifted. If the problem is that people who are making decisions can't speak Russian, they're not watching Russian television. If you go onto the main channel, Россия Jim, and you can see what they're saying. They're saying this isn't a war against Ukraine or a military operation. It's a war against NATO. NATO's doing this. They're already saying that NATO is. So what if NATO started, or NATO countries, or any country started using weapons in Russian territory? Then it wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference. What they then going to say to their audience? Oh, but well, before we weren't telling you the truth, but now we are. It's so. Therefore, if my way of thinking is this, is that NATO ought to start permitting Ukraine to use to advancing into the border areas. You could even put it so you can advance into Belgorod Oblast or Rostov Oblast or whatever, or Voronezh Oblast, and that would be permitted. Okay, I can appreciate that maybe they don't want Moscow touched or something like that, but using Western weapons. But that would be a way of getting around the huge fortifications. We saw a group of people from Russian resistance went on their holidays to Belgorod, crossed over the border, and nobody seemed to even notice. So that shows that the Russia itself knows that Ukraine can't. So it's put all its resources in these areas. It also strikes me that if, for example, the Belgorod Oblast were captured, then there's a very good negotiating point for getting Crimea back. That does strike me, and that also, I think, is looking at a map. It's perfectly feasible. So that's my opinion, and that okay. And also, you have there. I think the reason why it can't be broken through it's because of the amount of resources. Another thing I'd like to point out actually is that the when the Korean War ended, a border was thrown across Korea, which became the heaviest guarded border in the world, and it was then believed that communism could be contained in this way. And this very same doctrine was then brought to Vietnam, but totally different conditions. A huge border which needed to be controlled. Weapons were coming in from the same Soviet Union, from the Kremlin, being pumped into South Vietnam or via the Viet Cong, and through third countries, through Cambodia and through Laos. So there is historical precedent for this. So in my opinion, there you go. The doctrines from the past don't always work, but if you find a similar situation, I think that what Russia wants, or sorry, not Russia, but Putin wants, is to have a frozen conflict. To the one side will realize that they can't break through. That's us, and then they will eventually they'll keep their gains. Also, it has the benefit of increasing tension here, which suits the geopolitical aims and financial aims of the current Russian dictatorship. And it creates refugees, which is another thing they want to do for their own evil ends, and with the aim that the West will give up. Okay, sorry, I'll just look at the points here now that you made. Dick says they're only going toe-to-toe, no air support against one of the biggest and best equipped armies in the world who've had over a year to entrench. Yes, exactly. That's it. I think really that when I was in the liberated areas I was in, I've got plenty of video from there, but I haven't actually uploaded it. But just in case there was something there that had some military value, so I didn't. That's why I didn't do it. But mind you, I've got to make clear, I was very careful not to film anything that could have had any military value. But in the Kharkiv region, eastern Kharkiv region, the defenses that they put up weren't particularly. I mean, you could see them in places also in the south as well. You could see them where they were, but there weren't anything particularly to write home about, so to speak. Not like the defenses that they appear to have right now. Who thought that Ukraine would just bum rush the southern end of Crimea in one day? Well, I didn't, but there were people. I saw even generals saying that this was going to happen, and as them taking the videos off YouTube, you could find them as well by looking at interviews with certain people, yeah. Well, Dick says only corporate news puts out such incomprehensibly dumb ideas. Well, look, if there was any, obviously I wanted it to happen, but I mean, you've got to be realistic. What's possible and what isn't. I would have to say though, I wouldn't have thought that the September offensive of last year would have had the success it did have. If anybody'd asked me, no, it's not possible. Another thing which is happening at the moment is that in the northern end of the Donetsk Oblast, they are attacking Crimea, for example, from there. Towards Kupiansk, and it seems that there is a large amounts of Russian troops in that area. Anyway, don't know why I said that. Yeah, so Russia captured a Leopard and sent it to Iran. Are you sure? Please let us know your connection to British intelligence services and your woman's connection to Ukrainian intelligence services. Yeah, right. I'm sorry, this is incorrect. The Hindenburg Line was also a very deep defensive line. Yeah, okay, right. I don't think the Hindenburg Line was anything like what the Russians have built now. Of course, actually, no, the Hindenburg Line it wasn't longer. What the Russians have done now is actually longer. All right, so your excuses for Ukraine's poor showing in these offenses don't hold water. Why not compare the current military situation in Ukraine to that of 43-44 Ukraine? Why are you making irrelevant false comparisons to other military campaigns? Yeah, right, good. Nobody thought Ukraine could hold out against Russia, yet they are. Evening, Colin. So we have here a conspiracist here. Apparently, I don't know, this is me, it made large financial contributions in support of the Democratic Party for the 2020 election. All right, so that was probably me who did that, according to this character. Kursk was a monumental battle. It was the Allied invasion of Italy that helped contribute to calling off the German offensive at Kursk. Did you forget that? What kind of an armchair historian are you? Yes, that's true. The Battle of Kursk was called off because of the campaign, the invasion of Italy, and indeed there was one SS division that was actually sent to Italy from Russia as a result. Hello, Annie. The Allies bombed Caen to bits and suffered a similar difficulty as did the Germans at Stalingrad. Yeah. Hello, David. Hello, Murray. And Murray writes, my reading based on being at Sandhurst 50 years ago is that Ukrainians, whilst brave, have no real chance of recapturing which territory, smoke and mirrors, it seems. I think they do have a chance, but that'd been curious being Sandhurst 50 years ago. Yeah, I have to. Okay, David asked, did they have minefields in World War I? Yes, they did, but not on the levels that that we have now. Mines as such, I'm trying. When were the first mines? I think in Napoleonic times, but I mean it couldn't be mass done though. I don't know. I can't remember when the mine was invented. What about using flail tanks to clear the minefields like Hobbart's funnies on D-Day, says Colin. Yeah, there's an American vehicle which is called, I've forgotten what it's called now, something like crocodile or something like that, alligator, which works along a similar pattern, but it's not really realistic. The thing is this: if you've got a vehicle which explodes mines, then it's whilst it's exploding mines, it's going to be hit by incoming fire, because this is how you do it. You do it by support. Now, mines are, you get rid of minefields normally by exploding the mines using weapons such as cluster bombs, which is now the purpose to which they're actually being used. When I was in the army, there was something like that. They would actually fire things out, and then they would go, bah, 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 and that would make a path. Of course, it mightn't actually get everything, but that's how it works largely. Murray asks, air control with whom? Mine clearing vehicles, almost none. As I understand it, there are next to no of them there. Mikhail writes, it's indeed a very difficult situation for Ukraine without air superiority and also not being allowed to execute a flanking maneuver through Russian territory. That's a very well written, Mikhail, and you said that far better than I did. Why are they forced to execute frontal attacks on Russian very deep defensive line? Yeah, because they can't do anything else. They're not permitted to do anything else by the backers. The problem is this: in any situation, you have to actually attack in a frontal manner. There's no way. There's no way around it. So when you do things like platoon level tactics as well, it's somebody has to be in. You've got to have the contact, because the only other thing is to take the enemy out from a distance. But the thing is, you have to know where that enemy is to take them out from a distance. And the only way you're going to find out where they are, probably, okay, now we've got drones and all the rest of it, so maybe that would help. But the traditional way is for human to take them out, to find out where they are, to actually put the button up. And Vegard asked an extremely good question: why not use NATO weapons to fight them in Africa? I think the problem in Africa is the following: is that Western countries really just don't want to get involved in Africa any longer. Western countries messed Africa up. In my opinion, the messing up of Africa started in 1878 when the borders were drawn of the countries that exist there now. So whereas in Europe and in Asia as well, for that matter, there are countries which are based on ethnicity and language and things like that. In Africa, it isn't. So it's not at all that. No, it was based on the bits of lands that the Europeans decided they wanted. 1878 Congress of Berlin. So I think that my opinion on colonialization is this: is that the sometime in the 1950s, Britain, France, Portugal later realized that these colonies cost a fortune and that it's not worth having. So they just got out double quick. And so I don't think really there's any chance of NATO protecting the regime in somewhere like Niger, for example. It's be a very interesting country to visit, but I can't say that. The thing with what the Wagner group has done in Africa is this: is that they're a bunch of mercenaries, likes of people you might see in some film. And what they do is they come to an agreement with the owner of the country, the dictator or whoever may be there. And the dictator says, okay, well, he can rely on them as mercenaries from another country, who will then do his dirty work for him. Not like the Western countries who come in and say, oh yeah, you've got to do some human rights, this, democracy, that, and all the rest of it, and you've got to provide people with drinking water. These characters don't do anything like that. Wagner, they're just mercenaries. They're just doing it for the cash, and then they get their hands on the mineral wealth, which, in all honesty, in my opinion, should be used for the benefit of the locals, but just help themselves to that. And the problem in Africa is that the resources have been exploited and stolen for 150 years or so, and if not longer. and the resources, even after independence, ended up in the West. You get these dictators who are incredibly wealthy, and they just help themselves, and where the money ends up in Switzerland and the United Kingdom, offshore places, the United States, wherever. The locals just don't benefit, and they'll never get out of poverty until something's done about it. What can be done about it? I haven't got a clue. Anyway, so thanks, Murray. Yeah, sure. Colin says, same problem in the Middle East in terms of arbitrary borders. Yes, to a large extent, but in the Middle East, though, that you do not have the mixing of groups which might then start fighting amongst themselves. At least not to the extent that you have in Africa, for example. Murray lives in ex-USSR country with friendly relations with Russia and Ukraine. All right, where's that then? Uzbekistan. Right then. Oh, well, closer on the ground being in Poland. I hope I'm correct in my assessment. I'm not suggesting the fact that I'm on the ground in Poland would actually make that, it really makes that much difference. I could be, I could be sitting in now in Ukraine and still get it completely wrong. I don't think location necessarily has anything to do with it. But having said that, having seen some of the things I've actually heard on the internet by so-called experts, I mean, it was really quite shocking. Kyrgyzstan, sorry. Oh, lived in Kyrgyzstan for 5 years. Anyway, David, Iraq is made up of different tribes. I agree with it. Actually, no, I do take that back when I think about it, because in Iraq you've got the situation with people. It's highly tribalistic, and there was one of my mates from the army when we had this meeting. He'd married the old boys do, and he'd married an Iranian girl, and he said this: you cannot force democracy on a tribal society. And it's when I think about it, with the intercommunal violence in Iraq was pretty horrendous. And I do believe that they can. For us, we can't tell what side, somebody's Sunni or Shiite, but I'm sure they can tell perfectly well for those who are that way inclined. The strange thing is, though, in Russia, for example, where you've got a very large Muslim population, but they don't distinguish between Shiites and Sunni there. So anyway. Okay, so thanks very much for being here today. And tomorrow, I wanted to say this one because I've been thinking about this Ukrainian thing for some time, but I've been thinking about it with regards to the war, above all with the 1973 war with Israel-Egypt. And so anyway, tomorrow I'm going to do a video on this mate of Hitler's, and Hitler started messing around with his daughter, and who could that be? And I learned this not long ago, and so I'll tell you the story about it. So right, thanks. Oh, last question. What do you think will happen on the Southern Front in the next month? I don't think there'll be a breakthrough. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think there'll be a breakthrough. I think the thing is, in Ukraine you've got a different mentality, and you know yourself. I mean, from military training, you do not keep if you can't make a breakthrough, then you save lives. Lives are more important than anything else, and in an attacking situation. So in order, I think they might try and I think it'll stop. I think there will be minor gains. I mean, I honestly do hope that there's a breakthrough when then they have enough resources to pour through the lines, cut off the land bridge. I hope the Ukrainians will be on the Azov, and round up the the enemy there, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what really needs to happen is for us to sort of call a halt to it, and then make sure they've got the resources next summer to be able to wipe out the invaders. That's what I would like to think. But it's pointless. You can't just keep hitting your head against the wall in the middle. It's like the First World War tactics. Like in Blackadder, there was a top secret plan, and the top secret plan was for everybody to go over the top and get machine gunned. And the general says, well, how could you possibly know that? And he said, well, it's what we've done the last 17 times. He said, exactly, because we've done it 17 times before. They will never imagine that we'll do it again. And you do not, if there is this type of resistance, then just cannot attack. So thanks for being here, and so all the best. And so right, what? Zelensky's just had a car accident. Oh dear, I know nothing about that. Thanks, Murray. Irregular Mark Felton. Well, that's complimentary. And thanks, Colin. Anyway, look, we'll have to find out Mr. Zelensky's car accident. I'm very sorry to hear that. But anyway, I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay, and nothing bad happened. All the best. Bye for now.